Hello everyone, so we are doing notes on the effects of humans on the ecosystem. So humans are at the top of the food chain. We like to think we're the most powerful, dominant, superior creatures out there. And when we do this, I mean, we're not totally wrong. We truly are. The fact that we're using a computer to give you notes right now shows how superior we are. But with this comes a lot of downfall. So we're going to talk about two things today. Excuse me. And then on the next time we do notes, whenever that is, we're going to learn about all different ways that humans suck. I mean, we're just going to cut it like it is. So today's not so bad. The next time is a little bit worse. So there's something called succession. So communities are always changing via natural disasters or some other method. These series are predictable. We know about what's going to happen. We can predict it, just like in English class, you predict plots, or I'm sure there's other ways to predict things. These predictable changes are called succession. So if you're a big old history buff, or you're really into civics or government, which are all related to the government, you might know or heard of the word succession before. So we have a president, and if something would happen to that president, if he would die of natural causes, of some other causes, if he would be impeached, something along those lines, that he would have to lose his job, then the vice president moves up and becomes the president. Similar things happen over in England. They have a king and a queen. When the queen dies, her daughter will then become the new queen. So currently she's the princess. So the princess will then move up. It's just kind of how it works. Succession happens in schools too. So I'm a teacher. It doesn't quite work exactly the same, but similar. Teachers a lot of times will become assistant principals. And assistant principals will then become principals. Mr. Connolly, Mr. Weedo, Miss Harper, I believe Mr. Morgan, I'm not 100% sure on that. They were all teachers. Some of you might have had Mrs. Harper in 5th grade. I know she taught 5th grade before. Mr. Connolly taught in, oh goodness, I forget what county. But it was some county. I can't think of it. Maybe it'll come to me tomorrow. And then Mr. Weedo, he taught science and English and something else. He's all kinds of different. So succession happens all over the place, but in nature it happens in a particular way. So there's two types, primary and secondary succession. So we're going to talk about primary first because primary means first. So primary succession is the series of changes that occur in an area where no soil has ever existed before. That's the biggest thing you need to know here. We're starting on bare bones. We're starting on rock. So an example might be a volcanic eruption. So when a volcano spews its magma all over the place, and that magma then turns into rocks, it becomes a barren land. All the grass, all the trees, all the shrubs, all the bugs, all the animals die. They get completely buried under everything. So we have a brand new area to live on. There's a lot of areas that are just plain rock. Think out by the Grand Canyon. All that stuff is just rock. Just plain, bare rock. Okay. So primary succession would have to take place there. So we have these pioneer species. Think to history. The pioneer people, or whatever you call them, I'm going to call them pioneer people, the PPs. The pioneer people, they were the first ones to settle in new land. They got in their little wagons and their little horses, and then they trekked, let's say west, who knows? They went west, and then they found this new area, and they were like, look, I'm going to live here. It's so great. Okay, those are pioneer people. Now we're talking about pioneer species. So we're talking about two types of plants that can live on bare rock. These are often carried by wind or water, and the two types that you need to know are moss and lichen. Remember, moss is a non-vascular plant. It's that fuzzy carpet stuff that grows on the sides of trees, maybe a little bit on your house. I know I have some in my front yard. And then lichen is a weird thing. It's kind of like when algae and bacteria live together. I don't know, something weird. But these two plants can actually live right on the face of rock. Whereas the rest of our plants that we're thinking of typically need to live in some kind of dirt or soil. So these two species, moss and lichen, Facebook, go away. Moss and lichen will actually help to break up that rock. They will break it down. And then they will die and decompose back into nutrients. So what happens here is these guys have very tiny roots. And when those very tiny roots start to go down and penetrate into that rock, it does break the rock up. Think of like a hammer and a rock. It's going to smash, okay? Very small pieces of that rock are going to start to break down. Slow, slow, slow. And then the moss and lichen die. And that small rock plus the dead moss soon becomes soil. That's what turns it into that nice brown, lush soil that we're used to thinking about when it comes to plants. So reaching a mature community may take centuries. Okay, centuries is a very long time. A century is 100 years. So because it's plural, we're saying that this might take several hundred years to reach a community that looks like this picture. Notice that we have some plants down here on the ground. We have some kind of small looking trees. We have this guy here. It's a sapling. These two are very tiny. There's another sapling. And then we have some thicker, mature trees. That's a climax community. When we have our big trees and mostly all of our ground cover is gone. Because once these big trees, we talked about limiting factor, once these big trees grow up, it's going to limit the amount of sunlight that reaches the ground. So that means all of our grasses, our bushes, our shrubs are going to die off. So here's a picture. You're going to see it again on the worksheet later on. So I'm going to try and give you some hints and tricks right now, okay? So primary succession is bare rock. Notice we're starting with just rock here. Over time, you see this kind of like white speckled looking stuff on here? That's the lichen. Lichen is breaking down these rocks. You can see we have big rocks. Now we have less big rocks. Then we have some more breaking down. Notice that we have some still, I would say, large rocks, but now they're starting to get some soil. You can see some brown soil in here. Wait a second. Zing. We have some grasses, some flowers growing. They're very small. All of these plants are starting very short. Then we're starting to get a little bit taller. Some bigger bushes, a little bit of perennials, some flowers, maybe this big guy here, whatever he is. Then you start to get even bigger bushes and shrubs, and you start to get your conifers, your pine trees. And then hundreds of years later, we finally get our big trees, our climax community. And notice how much soil we have here. So all of this original rock is just continuously getting broken down. More soil, more soil, more soil. The roots are getting deeper. Notice here, the roots are very tiny. Here, they're getting larger and deeper. That rock is just getting deeper down into the earth. So really what's happening here is we're turning rock into dirt. And then when there's more dirt, that lets more plants grow here. So that's going to be a really big answer on your worksheet later on. So if you want to come back to this video and listen to what I say again, you are welcome to. The second one I think is a little bit easier, partially because you already kind of understand it, and partially because it's quicker. So secondary succession is a series of changes that occur in an area that already has soil. This area has just been disturbed or disrupted. So maybe, So maybe there was a fire or a drought, or humans went through and they did deforestation. They cut down all the trees. So secondary succession is very much quicker. So natural disasters commonly cause this to happen. Secondary succession occurs when there is already an ecosystem. So there's, let's just picture there's a big patch of trees out back of the school. Someone carelessly sets a small fire and it burns down all the trees. Well, there was already grass, trees, and animals in that area. So it's going to come back much quicker than before. It's going to take a while to make fresh dirt and to get the seeds in that area. But because the plants already know how to grow there, and because the animals know where to live already, it's going to be easier to grow back in that area. So this is usually a quicker process than primary succession because an ecosystem and dirt was already established. We already have soil in this area. We're not working with bare rock. So here, look down here, this original picture, look at all this soil. Okay, so in this area we have a fire. That's our natural disaster that we're working with here. Notice we have big plants, we have some conifers, we have some angiosperms, some gymnosperms down here. We have deep roots. After that fire, we're going to start our timer at year 0. All of our trees are dead. It kind of looks like some scarecrows mixed with some telephone poles. Okay, so everything's dead. Then we see the exact same picture as last time. We have small grasses, then some flowers, then we got some larger flowers, then this guy's sticking up again. Now we have our gymnosperms, our conifers, then we reach that climax community again, and we have our large oak trees, or maple trees, or hickory trees, beech trees, all those. Notice that the roots are getting deeper again. You can see here that think about when you make a fire, you're left with that brown, or not brown, black soot, or kind of like that leftover. Notice how that line continues the whole way through here. So you will always be able to dig up and see where was the last fire, about how long ago was it. Because as these new plants grow, they put down their dead leaves and their dead tree and their dead bark, and they make new fresh soil on top of the old burnt stuff. Okay, so that's what this black line is right here. That's where it was burnt. And as time goes on, it just gets pushed down deeper and deeper down into the soil. That's it. All right, so that was not too difficult. What you really need to know here is that succession is predictable. A scientist can look at a rock and say, all right, my great-great-great-great-great-grandbabies 5 generations from now are going to see big trees, but I'm never going to see that because I'm going to die before that. And when we look at primary succession, we can, I just explained that. We can see that we're turning rock into big trees. When we look at secondary succession, we can tell a flood happened, a hurricane, a cyclone, a fire, deforestation, something big happened, and it's causing plants, kind of like when in a video game you die, you're going to have a redo. Okay? That's exactly what's happening here. Everything died, you didn't defeat the boss of that round, and now we have a redo. Everything starts fresh. It's going to come back. And guess what? You've done it once already, so you're quicker at it. This time it only takes 150 years, whereas primary succession took hundreds of years, likely 200 to 300 years. This guy's happening in half the time. Okay, so I know it's still not quick, but it's quicker. Okay, so when you're finished with this, if you have any questions, come up to myself or another teacher in this classroom. Go to Google Classroom or look up on the front whiteboard to figure out where you need to go next.